There I am. Hello, hello. I hope you guys are doing well. I am super excited to be here as always. Be sure to tell me hi when you are here so that I know that you are here and I can um, welcome you. But I am super excited. So, we're going to continue on. As I have said before, a lot of this series is I took the structure of and some of the formatting then of this series from the book Single and Secure by Rich Wilkerson Jr. If you want to read that on your own, but it was just it's such a good like starting guide. It was almost like he was in my head writing all of the things that I was thinking. So it's definitely been helpful to kind of structure my own thoughts and put this together like this. So I am super excited that you are joining me again. Of course, when you are here, just say hi so I can say hi to you. But I do want to respect your time. So I'm not going to linger with the introduction part. We are going to hop right on in, make sure that I have my notes in the right place because that is helpful. And now I scroll too far. Da, 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 da. I promise you I had it. All right, there we go. All right, so this week we are talking about a tale of three singles. And unlike the media personality Oprah, if you read the story of Ruth and Orpah, you will quickly understand why the biblical Orpah was so forgettable. Why we don't talk about her much, right? It is a fascinating tale of three women that are linked by marriage, tragedy, and faith. So many themes that are common even in the movies that we like today, but that are not as unrealistic as a Hallmark movie, right? But you can read the full story for yourself in the book of Ruth. But I am going to summarize it for you, so that we can, so that you understand where I'm going with this week, right? So the story. Thousands and thousands of years ago, maybe not thousands and thousands, we'll just say thousands of years ago, there was a famine in the land of Israel. And so Elimelech, yeah, and his wife Naiomi and their two boys move they pack up their first century Uhaul and they move to Moab, to the country of Moab. Elimelech ends up, actually, he dies there in Moab, but Naomi and her two sons stay, and her two sons end up marrying local women, Ruth and Orpah. In time, though, both of her sons die, leaving all three women then widows. And so, by the norms and by the standard of the society and the culture of the day, having no children and no family and no males in the house specifically meant that, for all intents and purposes, these three women had absolutely nothing, right? They flat out nothing. However, Ruth was built different, and didn't settle for that. So, in a culture where being single brought shame, Ruth was single and secure. And that's kind of what we're going to unpack in our time together. Hearing that Israel then was no longer facing famine, Naomi decides to go back. And the exchange I'm going to read for you comes out of Ruth 1, verses 7 to 13. Okay, and that exchange went. With her two daughters in law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said to her two daughters in law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness, as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband." Then she kissed them goodbye, and they wept aloud and said to her, "We will go back with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me." Okay. So, um, and I'll put it up here so that you guys know the reference and can read it on your own. But all three women find themselves at a crossroads, right? They're facing a life that looks nothing like they had expected. And so I don't blame Naomi for being cynical. And if anything, I can identify with her. I can relate. Just like her, I've too, and I'm sure many of you watching this, but I too have been through um, a bunch of stuff, and I have found myself in a place where the past is painful, where the present can feel lonely, and where the future looks hopeless. Like, I don't know what's gonna come next, right? And in the story, um, oh, excuse me, I apologize for that. But in the story, Naomi encourages her daughters-in-law to leave her, because she's basically saying that she has nothing to offer them, right? She has no family, no wealth, no job prospects, no, political ties that can help them in any way. And so she offers them to go back to the comfort and the familiarity of Moab, which is where they're from, right? And then we read in Ruth 1, verse 14, that ultimately Orpah does take the invite to go back to her comfort zone and to the familiarity that she knows, and she kisses Naomi goodbye. But Ruth, on the opposite side, clings to Naomi and refuses to leave her. Right? And it's from Ruth that we learn important lessons about living single and secure. Okay, the first one that we are going to talk about um, is be the minority, because the majority is overrated. Right. So Ruth clung to Naomi and proceeds to give an impassioned speech in Ruth 1, verses 16 to 18. Let me find it for you and I'll read it to you. But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. So Ruth was determined. Ruth was dramatic for good reason. In this case, not dramatic for no reason. But Ruth was fiercely true to her path. Um, and even in the face of Naomi's insistence to leave her and to go her way, and even with her sister-in-law having decided to go and move away, Ruth was fiercely true to who she was and refused to go. Right? The crowd chooses easy. Okay, they opt for the path of least resistance every time. They go with the flow. They swim downstream, right? Whichever is easiest to do. But sometimes we need to go in the opposite direction of the crowd, right? Because you realize the importance of being who you were created to be. And it's not easy, and I would never lie to you and say that it is. But I'm sure that I don't have to tell you that when you choose to authentically be yourself, you may feel like you are in the minority, right? You stand out, you get noticed. right? And I've heard myself and my friends um, say, that we're looking for that special one, that 1 in a million, or really 1 in 8 billion type of love. Um, but when, I guess, lately, when I've heard myself think that, or when the thought has popped in my head, I've also then had to think, is how will he find me if I am exactly like everyone else around me? Right? Just because many other people trade self-esteem and integrity for Instagram likes doesn't mean that we have to, right? Just because other people we know or that we see from afar might compromise themselves for social acceptance doesn't mean that we have to. Just because Cosmo might tell millions of women that you must dress a certain way, wear a certain thing to catch the guy, doesn't mean that we have to hang on that too, that we have to do that too. Like we talked about in the last session, at the end of the day, it's your party, aka this is your life, right? You choose the life that you want to live. There is, oops, sorry, it's the wrong one. But oh, I think my slides are out of order. Sorry, I was trying to put this slide up. But there is strength in opting for what is right over what is easy, right? And Ruth is a powerful example of this. She understood um, what was right for her, and she refused to be dissuaded from it, right? All too often, I think you and I we give into the value systems or the philosophy or whatever the prevailing culture is at the time, right? And so then we forsake our convictions for convenience, right? And I don't think we do it necessarily always intentionally, but that's what this series is about. It's about us stopping to actually think about, how are we stewarding our single season? How are we living single and secure? And are we just going with the flow? Or are we um, rising above that and living different, right? So we forsake our convictions out of convenience sometimes, right? We walk like, we talk like, we might move like, and look like the crowd, because sometimes it's easier to swim with the current than to go against the grain, right? And try and swim opposite to the current of our day. But if the crowd, when you really stop to think and ask people about it, if the crowd themselves doesn't even, if they're not even living the life that they want, or if they don't even have the life that they want, why are we following them, right? The crowd doesn't even have an identity, because everybody is imitating everybody else. It's all vanilla. It's all the same thing, right? Why are we wasting so much time trying to imitate instead of innovate? Why are we wasting so much time trying to morph into um, somebody else's idea or the crowd's idea when we are brilliant and beautiful by ourselves, right? Like, where is the zing and the zest, right? Where is the pop of personality, right? Where is the authentic, real, vulnerable expression of humanity and of life, right? To be single and secure, you need to untether yourself from the crowd, right? You need to determine that the crowd will no longer dictate how you move, breathe, and operate, right? You have to quit living like the majority and embrace the minority life, right? So, example. So, are you with someone for the status that they give you, or the status that you feel being with them, but you know that y'all are not going to be together long term, like it will just never work long term? Or maybe are you, because that's how the crowd treats dating, right? Are you maybe in a relationship just to get out of it, whatever it is that you want, but with little or no regard really for the other person's feeling, because That's how the crowd sometimes does relationships, right? Are you making decisions about sex based on what feels good in the moment? Because that's a lot of times how the crowd views sex, right? Are you hanging out with friends that you know are like that, the friendship or that they are superficial, or that maybe it's even toxic? Because the crowd handles friendships like that too, right? Are you making decisions then out of fear and selfishness instead of love? Because if you are, that's how the crowd goes about making decisions, right? And I don't think, okay, so is the crowd always wrong? No, I don't think that the crowd is always wrong, but they are also not as right as their blogs and advice columns and unsolicited advice would have us think, right? As a Christian single made in the image of God, pursuing first the heart of our first love, you are called then to come out of the crowd. You are called to live counterculturally, right? To go against the prevailing culture. You don't have to give in then to the pressure to conform, but you have the freedom and the joy to be yourself, to stand out, right? The majority is overrated, right? And I'll stand in the minority with you, right? If you need somebody there with you, it is I. I am there with you. Number two. I think I showed, if I can find number two. Oh, why are my slides out of order? I'm sorry about that, guys. I don't know why my slides are so out of order today. But anywho, number two is stay on the path. You don't know what's up ahead. Right. So back to our story. Finally, realizing that Ruth was not backing down, Naomi agrees to have her tag along and come with her. And that's in Ruth 1:19. We read that the two women went on to Jerusalem. Right. They didn't stay by the road crying and woe is me and hoping that somebody would come by. Right. They went on. They kept on going. They moved on. They kept moving forward. They kept on going along the path. They didn't just stop along the roadside and just hold each other and cry. No, they made progress. They made moves forward. Neither of them had any idea what the future held at this point, right? Neither of them knew the plans of God or what God was going to do with them, right? And while God had plans to bless Naomi and give her a secure future, from her immediate vantage point where she was in the moment, she couldn't see that, right? From her reality, she had only bitterness to look forward to because that's what she had been experiencing, right? But we know the full story and we know that God had much bigger plans. But sometimes life can look bleak for us too from where we stand. But again, we have the benefit of knowing how the story ends. And so you and I, even though we will experience times like that, we can remember that God is the initiator and the finisher of our faith. He is the Lord of your journey. And so all he's asking us then is for us to have enough mustard seed faith to keep going, to keep putting one foot in front of the other, and to keep moving, to keep showing up, to keep doing the things, to keep walking with him, right? For sure, now that I'm 40 and I'm looking, over, I guess, my last 40 years, but this extensive track record I have now of life with God and walking with God, I can look back and see that most areas of life, the key is not speed, but it is endurance, right? It isn't starting, but it's in the finishing. It isn't all lucky breaks. It's the hard work, right? John Maxwell writes about the law of magnetism, and he defines it as who you are is who you attract, right? And he's talking about it in context of leaders and their tendency then to gather people around them who share their values, attitudes, capacity, or skill level, right? And the same tends to be true of us in relationships as it relates to our relationship too, in that like attracts like. And this can be, I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, I think it's kind of scary, right? But it does appear that you attract who you are and not necessarily what you want, right? And I know this is not a fun pill to swallow, but stick with me here for a bit. I am here with you. Uh, I'm sharing lessons from swallowing said bitter pill myself, and I'm working through this myself too. But if you are sitting on the side of the road, right, doing nothing, and you're just waiting for your life partner to magically show up, see you, sweep you off your feet, um, and skip you, right into fairy tale land, that ain't gonna happen, right? Because people want those who not only share the same values as them, but also the same momentum as them, right? So if somebody is already walking along the path, they're not going to stop and wait for you to match their speed, right? They'll most likely end up skipping on past you, right? So let's determine though to get up and to get moving so that we're not caught slipping at the side of the road eating bonbons, right? Wishing for some Hallmark movie nonsense, right? um, make the love of your life catch up to you, right? Make him, um, in his pursuit of you, have him catch up to you instead of him having to stop and wait for you, right? Let him catch you while you're doing what it is that you need to do, while you're running your race. And I gave some examples in my in-person relationship goals group, but I think I'm going to give some of those same examples here, right? Um, so maybe you say, you want a partner who is passionate, and lives life to the full. They want the fullest out of life, but you are the most apathetic person, right? If you were to get that mate, they would be incredibly bored with you, right? Maybe you want somebody with a great sense of humor who loves life, but you are the type of person that is constantly complaining and moping about, right? And even when your friends try to cheer you up or try to show you the sunny side of life, um, you are happiest when you are in negative Nancy mode, right? What about that is going to attract humor, right? Maybe you want someone that is ambitious, right? But you quit every single job you have ever started, and then you stay at home and you binge watch Emily in Paris and Bridgerton, right? Do you think that that's going to attract somebody who values ambition? Or maybe you want a man who is on fire for God, right? But you spend more time scrolling social media in one day than you spend with God in an entire month, right? And maybe the only things you pray about is, Lord, help me find this little black dress on sale, or, help me get this last minute appointment with my masseuse, right? What you project is what you get. And so it is your decision, right? Even in thinking about a partner that you want in the future, it's good to think about what kind of partner would you even be, right? If that is the kind of man that you want, are you even realistically the kind of woman that wants that? Like, is that something that's on your list because you feel like it should be on your list, or is it on your list because it's truly who you are? right? It's truly a value of yours. So I challenge you to look at your list and see, are you the man that you are saying that you want? If you are real, raw, and honest with yourself, would you, in your default setting, right? Not when you're trying too hard, would you be a good partner for that person? Right? And if the answer is no, then maybe some shifting needs to happen on the list, right? All right, point number 3 is bitterness is ugly, but faithfulness is always attractive. So back to the story of Ruth. Naomi was triggered in Ruth 1:20-21. She says, "Don't call me Naomi," she responded. "Instead, call me Mara, for the Almighty has made life very bitter for me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me home empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has caused me to suffer and the Almighty has sent such tragedy upon me?" Okay, so um, Naomi, the name Naomi means pleasant, while Mara means bitterness. And so, what Naomi was saying was that her life used to be pleasant, it used to be full and blessed, but now she has been left bitter and empty. Right? In contrast, though, Ruth was faithful. She was consistent and she was determined. She stayed close to Naomi, and kept an eye on her future, or securing a future for herself and her mother-in-law, right? Um, so in contrast, Ruth stayed faithful to God, to herself, to her family, her values, her morals and integrity, her responsibility, her gifts and talents, her creative ideas, and God's leading, right? On the flip side, so when we look at the two together, Naomi got bitter where Ruth chose to get better, right? Naomi gave up where Ruth chose to grow up, right? Naomi pushed people away and Ruth held people close. Naomi fixated on what she had lost while Ruth worked hard for what she had. Naomi saw God as her afflictor while Ruth saw God as her provision or her provider. Naomi saw defeat while Ruth saw potential. And Naomi prepared for death, but Ruth dreamed of new life. Right? And God, we read this in Psalm 30, verse 11, that God turns mourning into dancing and tears into joy, right? And He did precisely that for these two women, right? As we continue reading the story, and He did it all in His time. So if you are in anticipation then for getting married or remarried in the future, then let's you and I deal with any bitterness that we have, right? Resentment and hurt are not on anyone's list of a future partner or a future or ideal qualities for a future spouse, right? I sure enough on my list, I don't have anywhere on my list where it says I want a tall, dark, and bitter man, right? Not a fan, would not recommend, do not want, right? Nor do I have on my list, and I've never dreamt of a man that is smart, fit, on fire for God, and cynical, right? Nobody wants that. We don't want that in a future spouse. We don't want to be that for a future spouse. Right? Ruth had also been hurt deeply, right? So she was widowed too. She had left everything that she knew as well. She had suffered a loss as well, right? But she didn't let that change her, or change her name or change her character because of it. She remained steadfast in her identity, right? As I listed earlier, she stayed faithful to all these things. right? So faithfulness is not being less of yourself, rather is being true to yourself. It's not about hype, but about consistency. And God rewards faithfulness, right? Faithfulness is always going to be attractive. And then point number 4, which is our final point, when you turn up, things turn out. Right? So realizing that she needed to provide for her household, Ruth took advantage of what she had, of the options that she had at her disposal, what she had on hand. And so during the grain harvest, poor people were allowed to follow behind the harvesters and pick up any leftover or scattered stalks of wheat, right? And so that's what Ruth did, right? She gleaned in the fields. And as God would have it, Ruth ended up gleaning in the field of a rich and unexpectedly kind bachelor named Boaz. And Boaz turned out to then be a distant relative of Naiomi. Um, and we learned this in Ruth 2, verses 3 to 4, which reads, "And as it happened, she found herself working in a field that belonged to Boaz, the relative of her father in law, Elimelech. While she was there, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. 'The Lord be with you,' he said. 'The Lord bless you,' the harvesters replied." I think that phrase is so um, funny, I guess, in terms of like as it happened, right? And funny how often fortunate coincidences happen to faithful people, right? So when you turn up, things turn out, right? You can't control how things turn out tomorrow 100%, but you can still choose to show up as your best self, most authentic self today. And often success comes down to simply turning up, to simply being about your business, right? And doing what it is that you need to do. You move, you act, you feel, you decide, right? You grow, you become, you risk, right? And you live. Right? Ruth knew when to act and she knew how to show up. And Boaz took notice of her, right? And then by the end of the story, they get married. Um, Now, I think during the entirety then of the story, right, Ruth had options the whole way along the way, options that even in our modern day, modern society, we have the same options. But she could give in, she could sell out, or she could turn up, right? She could show up. And Ruth chose to turn up. She chose to be about her business and do what it is that she needed to do with whatever was in her hand. And that resulted then in things turning out for her. And Ruth found, so this one, yeah, Ruth was found because she was in the right environment, not because she was trying to be found, right? Ruth was in the field about her business of feeding herself and her mother-in-law. She was not out there, in this case, trying to be found, right? She wasn't playing the field. She was working the field. She was getting stuff done because that is who she was. She knew what she wanted and she went after it, right? She did what she needed to do. And as for me, right, when that special someone finds me, whenever the Lord wills it, and if that's in His will, I want to be found working, right? I want Him to find me building my future, right? I want Him to find me making the most of whatever it is that I have in my hands, because that's just who I am, right? I want Him to find me being all that I am, right? Being strong, resourceful, motivated, creative, right? I want Him to find me being my most vibrant, valuable, and secure self. so that I will continue showing up in my life, um, and being faithful to the leading of God. And I want Him to find me doing just that, right? Showing up in my own life, continuing to be faithful to God, right? And there's no right way to be single. There's no normal way to do life. I don't think there is. And as singles, we're not a monolith. So every single is not like every other single, right? You are unique in your own circumstance, your own perspectives, your own view, your giftings, your skills. So singles are not a monolith. No one single is exactly the same as another one, which is why I say that there's no like right way to be single or one normal formula to do life, right? But it is my prayer then that we let Ruth, with her bold approach to singleness, serve as inspiration to us as we make our own way, because ultimately it's your party. Ultimately, you decide how to live and what choices you are going to make. Right. So to wrap up real quick, to wrap up the points I talked about: be the minority, stay on the path, be faithful, not bitter, and turn up. Right. And just so you know, I am here in the trenches with you, right? I am a single myself, walking this thing out day in, day out with you too, right? So I am here in the struggle with you. Um, just sharing what I've been learning and hoping that it blesses you too, and that we can do this thing together, right? That we can hold each other's hand, we can help each other through, and that we just are reminded that you're not by yourself, you're not as alone as you think, and that there's other like-minded women out here that are pursuing the heart of God, even as we, wait on the one who will pursue us too, right? Like man that will pursue us too. Um, so yeah, so I am here in the trenches with you. I am rooting for you. I am praying for you. I see your comments. I get your messages that you send, and I again, I'm here with you. I'm here for you, and we're doing this thing together because you and I are ordinary everyday women that are living our singleness, living our everyday lives in partnership with our Heavenly Father, letting Him add His extra to our ordinary then for extraordinary influence.